Hello, welcome to the 12th day of July 2025. My name is Kurt, and this is my daily Good Life meditation. This is something that I do every morning at 5:30 a.m. as an exercise to remember my life objectives and principles, those which are outlined in my book, Going Alone, which you can read for free at goingalone.org. I also use the time to think about the last 24 hours and how I did with the challenges and the opportunities that I met. I go over the objectives and principles of my creed, at least one principle of the creed, and I prepare for the coming day. But first, a quick check of the weather and a little bit of a welcome and disclaimer part that I usually do. It's now just at, looks like about 65 degrees? 65 degrees. No, I'm reading the humidity. It's 25 degrees and 65% humidity. That humidity is going to be dropping. It's actually quite pleasant. You can see both temperature and humidity are right in the green zone right now. It really, really feels nice. Now, with that said, let me do my usual welcome to new subscribers. It's good to have you here. A little bit of info. This is not a video about Japan. This is a journal entry that I do. I make this video to talk about my own values in order to tune myself to be in better alignment with what's important to me. So you're welcome to watch and leave comments if you want. I don't read or respond to comments until the end though. But just be ready. This whole video is me talking about my own life. So heads up. Also, I do talk about sensitive subjects, sometimes like death, which makes some people uncomfortable. And huge thank you for watching my videos, and your support as YouTube members and Patreon supporters. I really appreciate it. All right, so I keep notes, and I'm looking at my notebook for the last 24 hours. Whoa, look at this wind. A little worried this camera's gonna fall over. You can see I lost in the wind yesterday. My wind chime lost its banner, so it doesn't make any noise anymore. It blew somewhere out into the bamboo forest or something. I haven't found it yet, so I'll have to fix it somehow. Okay, so I always take a look at my notes from the day prior, the last 24 hours, to talk about this, see what there was of note. Now, I'm not just recounting the things that happened. I'm looking for things that were noteworthy as challenges or opportunities. Sometimes these things come to mind as I'm doing the video, just as it's happening just now. For example, in the course of yesterday, I had some moments when I really felt, how do I say that? It was driving around and it was doing stuff. And I felt like a stranger in a strange world, which is an old feeling that I remember when I lived in Japan before. And I've only been back 6 months, and I knew that things would largely not change in coming back. That was part of the calculus in deciding whether we were going to come back at all. My wife Yumiko and I talked about this at length, which was namely the fact that I didn't feel like I belonged here before when I lived in Japan. That never changed in over a decade, and it won't, and I knew it wouldn't, largely due to my own failure to acclimate, my failure to learn the language, and my, for the most part, disinterest in much of that. So, what would I expect, right? How could I expect anything other? Nevertheless, feeling like an alien in a place is something that you can't get over, even if it's even though if it's due to my own shortcomings. And I knew coming back that none of that would change. That I would come back and I would, fail to adjust. I would continue to fail to learn the language, and I would continue to feel like an outsider. So this is no surprise. So here's the thing. how did I adjust to that yesterday? When it was coming up and it was happening. It happened multiple times yesterday. Well, I referred back to my notes, not these notes, but my mental notes from years prior, from the experience of living here before, and from the plans to come back, in which both my wife and I recognized that things would largely not change, and that I would simply have to live with that, as would everybody else around me. And that's just what I did. So it came up yesterday. It was like planning to go to Disneyland, and before you go, having been to Disneyland before, bring the family to Disneyland, and saying to yourself, well, I know from past experience at Disneyland that it's going to be crowded, it'll be hot, it'll be expensive, and that some of these things will, be difficult for me to handle in the moment. And then when you get to Disneyland, say, well, I prepared for this. I knew that this would be crowded, hot, difficult, and I'm ready for it. And that's the kind of thing, as a father and as a grown adult that's done Disneyland multiple times in places like Disneyland with a family, I was able to successfully do that. That strategy works very well. And turns out it works well with coming back and living in another culture too. We were perfectly situated in the United States, great jobs, great place to live. We had a very sweet life there. Sure, it would have taken a little longer. We would have had to work probably for another 5 years before we could retire if we'd stayed in the United States. I chose to give that up, to come here, to retire early, and to enjoy this life that I enjoy very much with my wife and my family here. I knew that doing that would come at the price of not being able to, or feeling like not feeling like, nor seemingly able, or, if I'm honest, willing even, or interested even, to blend in. Because that's how it kind of feels here. It's like, I'm not an otaku for anything in Japan, even Japan itself. I'm more enamored of the general atmosphere of the world here, and I'm not particularly interested in fitting in or necessarily even learning the language. It just doesn't interest me very much. Judge me one way or the other if you like. It's simply a fact. So coming back and realizing that I would not be fit in, and that would largely be due to my own failure of motivation or interest or action, I seem to be handling it the way I did as an adult, taking my family to Disneyland the second or the third or the fourth time. I know what I'm getting myself into, and I'm all right with that. And that's exactly how it went down yesterday. So that was interesting. That's a first. Living here in the past and feeling that's really big. It wasn't even in my notebook, but it's now that I'm thinking about it, it's absolutely enormous. Because I knew coming back that this would happen, and I accepted it. My wife knew that this would happen, and she accepted it too. We talked about it before we made the decision to come back to Japan, that I would face the same, and we would face as a couple, the same challenge of being a person who does not and will seemingly never adapt to life in Japan, and my wife being married to someone who does not and seemingly will never adapt to a life in Japan, and for both of us to be all right with that. Like I said, this was factored into our decision making in coming back. This isn't a surprise to either of us. And my wife is so generous as to remind me of that at times, that the fact that I'm kind of almost like a kid to her here, because she has to take care of me in so many ways, was something that she accepted in deciding to come back. That's probably the hardest part of it as a grown man, to accept that fact. And given that we that's an agreement that we made. I'll do that. Now, if I've talked about this before, if my wife were to die before me here, then I would probably go back to the United States, simply to finish my life there, simply so that I'm not a burden to anybody here. Now, of course, if my daughter Emily has kids and she's established here, maybe I might have to rethink that a little bit. You know, remember, this is my personal journal, so I can talk about things, anything I want, and it can be as open as I want. So I'm pretty fortunate that I can throw money at any problem, and if my wife was to die first, I'm pretty well off, and I can just throw money at problems here and get by into my old age, right? So I hopefully won't have to be too much of a burden to my daughter. But if my wife were to go first, just so that I can not be a burden to anybody, I'd probably go back and finish life in the United States. Don't call that a decision. That's just a likely alternative, likely outcome. In all likelihood, I'll go first, and that won't be the case. So anyway, that's an interesting note. That's bigger than the thing that I have. It could potentially be bigger than the thing I have written down. I'm just going to linger on this for a second more. And while I do that, let me refill my hot water. Back in just a sec. I can keep talking at you while I do this, because this microphone extends into the house. Having these hot water pots are great. All the tea you want, all the hot water you want. Right there at a push of a button. What I just described bodes really well for our remaining life in Japan. Mm-hmm. No, there's the first swallow of the morning. All right, let's get on to the other thing that was a note here. In the last, I have the heading here, last 24 hours. And the only note that I have here is this thing called deep balance, which is something that I probably talked about 2 months ago, that has been showing up from time to time. And when it shows up, it's like being at a restaurant and suddenly realizing that Angus Young from AC/DC is seated at the next table. And you're like, whoa, where'd you come from? You know, I wouldn't say anything. I wouldn't pester Mr. Young or anything like that. I would just be astonished that suddenly I'm sitting next to a celebrity, right? This deep balance shows up in my moments in my life now, from very time to time, not often. Just like I said, the last time I mentioned this was at least 2 months ago, and the time before that was another 2 months before that. But what it is, and I probably, you know what? These two things might be related. I was saying before how I am not very engaged in Japan, nor do I have very much interest in being engaged in Japan. What has resulted of that is that when I'm out and about in this community, and I do my things, I could do the radio exercise every morning, and I talk to my neighbors, and I participate in the community, and I never ask anybody to translate for me. I simply strive and do as best I can. So even though I said I'm not very interested in engaging in the culture, nor am I very interested in engaging or learning the language. I have really no interest in doing that. But let me just put a caveat on that. Nor do I have any real interest in engaging with anybody in my own language either. if I was back, this would be exactly the same if I was back in the United States. I have no interest in having friends in my life. I mean, pretty much zero interest. And the people that were previously that I, I would have considered to be the friends in my life, that's pretty much a thing of the past. Um, so just keep that in mind. And it's not that I'm well, I guess it's not that I'm antisocial or anything like that, or that I don't like people. It's just talking with human beings, anyone other than my wife. My wife is the one person that I truly engage with and talking with. And we spend all of our time together. So I get plenty of social interaction with someone that really is meaningful to me, that I've known all my life, that knows me very well, and I know her very well. Maybe that's the reason why I enjoy talking with my wife so much, is there's no need, there's no preamble, there's no false face, or there's nothing surprising. We don't surprise one another with our behaviors or our opinions, because we know it very well. We get straight to the point at all times. And sometimes there is no point, and we're okay with that as well. Whereas if I'm engaging with anyone else, you have to deal with all the social machinations, the interchange, the communication, which for a lot of people is very pleasant. They enjoy that kind of stuff. They'd love to go to sidle up to a bar and meet a stranger and get to know that person and hear their story. I don't want any of that. No, thank you. I don't even want to do that with people that I like. It's just not how I want to spend my time anymore. So there's a lot of layers here, right? So when I say, for example, that I have almost no interest in engaging with the Japanese culture or learning the Japanese language, like I could just as easily say I have little to no interest in engaging in the American culture or in speaking with my own people in our language, English. It's the same. So it's not that I'm necessarily saying that I have any feeling, that this feeling and this wish and this desire of how to live is applicable only to Japan. It's applicable to everybody. And it's and it comes up in strange ways, because, for example, I'll get people who all, and this might come across strange. I get people who watch my videos, and pretty frequently people actually come by. I mean, like once a month, someone will come through town and want to get together, and that is hard work for me. That's the hardest part of this job, so to speak, is to make the effort to meet people in person. Because the same thing I said about Japan and America holds with everyone, absolutely everyone. So that's interesting. I didn't. Well, I knew it, but sometimes it helps to flesh this out in some way by talking about it out loud. Let me come back to this deep balance thing and experience. Okay, now I remember. Now I remember how I got on that tangent. So, as a result of the fact that I am largely antisocial, decidedly so, when I'm out and about in the community, I'm not being really engaged in what's going on. I'm kind of just there. Kind of like a golden retriever in the back of the car. That's me. And what's begun to happen is that there's this deep balance that is kind of like the next level down. If it feels like it's a down, the next level down from the peaceful, easy feeling, the PEF that I sometimes talk about, where the peaceful, easy feeling is like this, that right now, what you're seeing right here, which is my everyday. This astonishing, mind-blowing environment is my world all the time now, which has engendered this peaceful, easy feeling. There's very little stress in my life. I have very little wants or needs. I pretty much do as I like. And if it sounds like I'm bragging, so be it. This is my journal. I can talk about anything I want. I can say it any way I want. This is the reality of the experience. You know, there's very little that demands my attention and time, although I do strive to live a good life. Not a life of indulgence, not a life of wanton excess or showy living, but a life of where my decisions and actions and the things that I'm doing throughout the day and the engagements that I do have with people yield the improved well-being of as many as I possibly can. So I am living a decidedly purposeful life, but it just happens to be in this rarefied air, especially now at 25 degrees and 64% humidity. Good gosh, it feels like heaven right now. So the deep balance seems to be something a drop lower down. So the peaceful, easy feeling happens in this circumstance, which is becoming part and parcel of my everyday. The one challenge is to find a way to keep to keep this high RPM engine that's going on in my brain. High RPM, not because I'm saying I'm a smart guy, but saying because I've spent 40 years running my mind in sixth gear, you know, and I'm only 6 months into the fact that I can shift down a bit, and I don't know how to do that very well. So it's hard. Sometimes I sit here and I'll do this for half an hour, and then I'll be like, what next? And the reality is there doesn't have to be a what next. You know, I haven't gotten there yet. But every once in a while, this PEF drops down a notch even further into what I can only describe as a feeling akin to what we get when we meditate. Oh, there's a hornet right there. Just came swooping in. Here it comes. It's the Asian giant hornet, most dangerous animal in Japan. So that happens. It drops down a notch into this deep balance, and it's really a strange feeling. It's a feeling like where, you know, if I was, for example, going to be executed, if I was on death row, for heaven forbid, for whatever reason, or maybe I was, let's say it was a death row, whatever the case, maybe I got caught by the enemy in the war and they're going to execute me for some reason. This would be the feeling that I would want to carry with me to the execution, to the scaffold or the pole or whatever it would be. It's like this feeling of it's almost like an invulnerability, like can't be reached. It's a peace deeper than peace itself, seemingly. I know I'm starting to sound all wooey. I guess it's hard to talk about this stuff without going there in a way, because maybe that's why so many of the people that pursue meditation and those types of activities kind of sound wooey, because maybe that's the right vocabulary for it, but that's how it feels. This deep balance it showed up yesterday. It showed up a few times, and I noticed it when it was there. It didn't stay. It dropped back up a notch to peaceful, easy feeling, which just 3 months ago, peaceful, easy feeling was like, you know, being set loose in a candy store. Peaceful, easy feeling was the greatest thing ever. And now I've realized there's this other level down further, which is this deep balance. And I want to pursue it. And I think that concerted efforts of mindfulness, meditation, remember before I said, I've got this, my brain is in sixth gear all the time, dropping the gears down in a deliberate manner, maybe to the fifth or fourth gear, seeing what I can do when that happens. Okay, it's a project in action. Okay, let's see, the next step I'm going to do is go over my creed. Again, you can read about my values, my objectives, and my principles in my book, Going Alone. available at goingalone.org. Read it for free. Okay, in the chapter titled The Good Life, I outlined 8 objectives as follows, and each and every day I require of myself to at least name these 8 objectives or talk about them in detail if I want to. These are as follows, beginning just naming them: to be always ready to die. Number 2 is to make good and effective use of time. Number 3 is to develop and maintain good and sound life principles. Number 4 is to cultivate good emotional reactions. 5 is to perform good actions relative to my creed. Number 6 is to recognize my true limits and true opportunities. 7, to do just one thing at a time, and do that thing slowly and deliberately and carefully. And number 8 is to keep my balance. Let's read principle number 3 from the book. This is called the homunculus, a strange word. It actually means something. It refers to kind of think of like a little person living inside your head, behind your cranium. I always like to say Men in Black, and that one alien where the face pulls out and there's a guy inside. Think of that, but in your own head. It's you inside your head, the homunculus. Principle number 3. This is the small, mute, and... Sorry, I need my glasses. This is the homunculus. This is the small, mute, and hidden man within my head, the imaginary mortal who seemingly pulls my levers and strings and hints at my opinions and judgments, and who must die utterly upon the failure and dissolution of my person. The homunculus is as imaginary as a soul, though a much better vehicle to remind myself that consciousness is nothing more than another organ of my body, serving a particular function, and is subject to corruption and death in the end as my spleen, liver, or any other bodily organ. So imagine a small little person inside our heads who is at the seat of control and is also the mortal who will die upon our death and go into oblivion as our body degrades away and as our light winks out. No soul, no eternity, no forever, no magic, just the biochemical interaction of all this stuff that's happening here, and alive for the moments that I'm alive, capable of existing and experiencing this seemingly, and gone at once and forever in the moment of death. Arming myself with a vision of myself as such a frail and ultimately timeful, mortal entity, nothing permanent about me, nothing forever, no heaven or hell to fuss over. All we have is the good living that we can do now, execute now. That is what the homunculus reminds me of. And it also, keeping in mind that I don't believe in heaven or hell, and I don't believe in God, and I don't believe in a soul or afterlife, that once I'm gone, that's the end. That really motivates me to fulfill a couple of my objectives, namely, to be ready for death so that I have done all the work that I want to do, the useful work that I want to do now while I'm alive. 2, to make good and effective use of time. 3, to develop and maintain good life principles and objectives and values, so to speak, so that I am living a consequential life in terms of what I define as to be consequential. And also to make a good and effective use of, well, I already said that, of time. Yeah. The homunculus does all that and keeps me active to live well. As for the next 24 hours, it's Saturday. We might go to a flea market. I forgot to check with Yumiko. I think there's one today. I do need to get some antiques for the store. I'm going to do some weeding out in the yard. Oh, I want to add one more thing about this deep balance. Okay, even though my life is in pretty good shape right now, you know, I'm well provisioned, healthy, things are good, I do have worries. There's things that are challenges. You know, I don't typically talk about those things here. I consider them kind of the the stuff that's my own attendant concerns. So it's not that I don't have things to worry about, I do. But I want to point out that when this deep balance arrives, those worries, they lose their potency. I still worry about them, and I still attend to them, and I still think about them, and I still talk to my wife about these things so that we can work them out together and figure out our way forward, in terms of making sure that we are not only secure and safe now, but we will remain secure and safe in the future. That's mainly what it's about, is making sure that this apparatus of self-support is secure from both myself. I assume I'll die earlier than my wife, and then from my wife after I'm gone. That takes some work. I do worry about these things, but when the deep balance flows, I attend to these things with less pain, if you know what I mean. Okay, let's read comments, and then I'll be able to get started on the day. Hi, Michelle. Good morning, Kurt. I hope you and your wife have an amazing day. Thank you so much. I appreciate the well wishes. Hello, Tim. Good morning. Maybe it's better to accept the lack of adaptation than trying to adapt and not being happy. Though, one, I think for myself I would have forsaken a fair bit to retire 5 years earlier. I want to make sure I follow this. Maybe it's better to accept the lack of adaptation than to try to adapt and not being happy. That's what my wife has seemingly done. She's like, you know, don't even just be yourself, Kurt, here in Japan. You know, she says she says you get by, you know, you might be holding yourself to a standard that is unnecessary and unreasonable. Just enjoy your life, Kurt, here in Japan, and do the best you can. I think that's what you're referring to about the adaptation. And he says, I think for myself, I would have forsaken a fair bit to retire 5 years earlier. Yeah, I think so, especially now realizing what I'm starting to discover. And you and I have talked about this, Tim. Earlier the better. Robert says hi to myself. Hi, Robert. To Michelle and Tim. Tim says hi to Robert. Evelyn. Hi, Evelyn. I think about where I am going to spend my remaining years all the time. Next month I'm going back to Italy for 3 months, then Greece. It's a luxury problem. Wow, wonderful. Tim says, I guess to consider if you went the extra mile to adapt more or the urge to fit in, engage, etc., what satisfaction would you gain? Wasted effort? Just not what I want to do. It's not how I want to spend my time, you know? But, you know, it's the same thing. It would be the same thing if I moved from Huntington Beach. Let's say instead of moving from Huntington Beach, which is where we lived before we lived to Shizuoka, if we'd moved from Huntington Beach to Seattle, I would want to spend zero time doing adapting and fitting in and learning to enjoy life in Seattle. It's just, I mean, maybe the last part isn't the right part, but you know what I mean? It's not a matter of Japan or the Japanese. It's just that I have very little. Everything that I want to do in life involves mostly being alone with my thoughts and spending time adapting or getting to know or even communicating with others around me, my own language or not, is not what I want to spend my time doing. You know, my uncle, I don't know, he and I didn't get to know each other very well, but he spent, at the end of his life, he went out, my uncle Walter, he went out, he disappeared out into the desert, and he wound up dying all alone way out in the desert in a trailer. Sound familiar? I wonder, he and I never got to talk. I never got to know that man. He was my father's older brother. But that's how I'd like to spend my time too. But the next best thing, and if I wasn't married, and if I wasn't a family man, that's how I would spend my life. But I am these things. I chose to be these things, and without regret or complaint, this is how I want to live. Michelle says to Robert, thank you, and I hope everyone is having a good day or evening, no matter where you are. Sub-00204, good evening from London. Hey there, good evening. Robert says hi to Sub-00204. Tim says, would the irony be if you went back to America, depending on where you settled, it could actually be worse? Is a kind of lottery in some ways. I think the PEF would be more easily attainable where you are currently settled. Well, I've done the math. So probably what you're referring to is quality of life, ability to have health care, et cetera, et cetera. So I'd be fine in the States too in that regard. If I waited until 65, I'd be all right in that capacity as well. I wouldn't be able to, nor would I want to settle in Los Angeles. But I have alternate places. I even have a spreadsheet with the names of places where I would go to live to spend the end of my life. And you're right. It could be problematic. It could be things, but it will be if my wife goes before me. If my wife goes before me, that's going to be a tricky situation for me here. Not speaking the language well, not being able to read. I'm going to have a hard time taking care of myself in the end, and not being a burden on to my daughter. Well, so with that, you guys have heard me say this before. If you probably have. Suicide is always an option, right? And so if that comes to if I'm old and my wife goes first, and I'll probably go back to America, where as long as I can sustain myself, I'll sustain myself until whatever it is that happens. That's going to be the end, and like high likelihood, like stage 4 cancer or something like that. Then I'm just going to disappear, and no one's ever going to find me again. So that's part of the plan too. We'll see if I can actually pull it off. I'm pretty confident I can. Evelyn says, I'm very happy that you got to spend your time alone with the pups in the tiny house in the woods. Very cool. There's 2 birds. Yeah, that was fun. That was really good. It's interesting how that time. You know what that time was like, Evelyn? It wasn't like living in the desert or going to the desert to write Going Alone. That time living out in the desert with the dogs and then just Rudy for a while was exactly like sitting in the waiting room at a doctor's office for a long time, waiting for whatever's coming up. I really wasn't there. My mind was on whatever, like a dentist is probably a better idea, waiting to go get your teeth drilled, right? You're just waiting for that nurse to come out and call you to the front, and you hope it's all going to go all right. So I wouldn't consider that time being necessarily well spent. It was time like sitting in a dentist's waiting room. It was spent. I did it. I got through and now here I am inside the doctor's office now, and it's a pleasant place. Well, that's it. I made it to the bottom of comments. Thank you all for joining me. I'm going to sign off for now. I have to catch up on a couple of things before radio exercise, which starts in about 10-15 minutes, and I haven't uploaded my Good Life meditation. I haven't uploaded my Retiring in Japan video for yesterday, which these Kanohi days, these changing the format of those to just make them capturing the days, is really starting to work out. The sense that I need to be providing heavy content or really rich and interesting content to that is faded. I'm just turning the camera on with whatever. Thanks, Tim. I appreciate the well wishes. You have a great day as well. Take care, everybody. Be safe, but not too safe.